The first topic that we're going to discuss today is structure in schools. We have classical Weberian bureaucracy, holds organizational inventory, formalization of structure, Mintzberg's coordinating mechanism of structure, and depth organizational structure. Let's begin with classical Weberian bureaucracy. The classical Weberian bureaucracy was introduced by Max Weber, a German psychologist and a political economist. He stated that to manage an organization efficiently, it is essential to have a clear line of authority along with proper rules, procedures, and regulations for controlling each business operation. Does anyone know what is bureaucracy? Bureaucracy refers to the possessing of control over a group of people or activities through knowledge, power, or authority. Weber came forward with the concept of bureaucracy in management, where he believes that there could be only three kinds of power in the organization: traditional, charismatic, and legal rational. In traditional authority, the workers considered as servants, and they are dependent upon their leader or lord and following the stated rules and regulations blindly. Under charismatic power, due to the extraordinary personality of the managers, the workers are deeply motivated to perform their best on the tasks allotted to them. However, this charisma may fade away with the manager's layoff, resignation, or demise. The last power is legal rational. The workers either need to abide by the legal rules or the naturally applicable laws. In short, all the employees need to follow a consistent set of principles. Thus, Weber developed the bureaucratic management theory, where he emphasized on a formal organizational structure. To properly maintain the hierarchy, he set as 6 principles of bureaucratic theory. Government organizations majorly adopted Max Weber bureaucracy theory. Weber gave the following 6 principles for managing an organization effectively and efficiently. These are authority hierarchy, formal rules and regulations, division of labor, career orientation, impersonality, and formal selection process. So let us take a look deeper to these principles. First is authority hierarchy. Weber proposed that there should be a systematic hierarchy in the organization, defining the position of each employee from top to the lowest level. In such a system, each employee knows who they have to report, whose order they need to follow, and what is the role of different personnel in the organization. Next is formal rules and regulations. There should be a clear set of principles, procedures, rules, and regulations in written form to be followed universally by everyone working in the organization, irrespective of their position. Division of labor. The whole work should be assorted into smaller task sets to ascertain that every set of tasks is assigned to the right person. Like for example, if that person is capable of fulfilling the task, then he will be assigned to do that task. This not only improves the work efficiency but also ensures proper allocation of job responsibilities. Career orientation. This is another essential principle that management should motivate employees to build a long-term career in the organization by providing them job security and performance-based incentives. Impersonality. In an organization, the impersonal relations develop among the employees, which may lead to favoritism or nepotism. Weber said that the application of rules and managerial decision should be impartial and independent of such relations. Moreover, this decision must be based on rational and practical grounds rather than emotional or impersonal influence. And lastly, formal selection process. Weber believed that the workers should be recruited through their technical skills and expertise instead of first come, first selected basis. Even the promotion should be based on performance and merit. This not only leads to better productivity but also adds to the employee's growth and satisfaction. Now, let's talk about Hall's organizational inventory. One of the earliest systematic attempts to measure bureaucratization is Hall's of 1962, development of an organizational inventory to measure 6 characteristics of bureaucratic structure, or those we tackled earlier, the 6 principles. D.A. Mackay of 1964 subsequently adapted and modified the organizational inventory in his study of the bureaucratization of schools. He measured bureaucratic patterns in schools using the School Organizational Inventory, or SOI, a questionnaire that operationalized the same 6 dimensions of structure. The interrelationship of these bureaucratic characteristics of schools also have been explored practically. Studies indicate that there are 2 relatively distinct patterns of rational organization rather than one completely integrated bureaucratic pattern: hierarchy of authority, rules for incumbents, procedural specifications, and impersonality tend to vary together, and specialization and technical competence similarly vary together. However, the 2 groups are found to be independent of or inversely related to each other. In this table, we have labeled the first set of characteristics as bureaucratic and the second set as professional. This distinction calls attention both to the potential conflict between authority based on technical competence and expertise, and that based on holding an office in a hierarchy, and to the potential incompatibility between professionalization and bureaucratization. To combine together the bureaucratic and professional patterns in a single model of bureaucracy seems to obscure important differences among schools. Indeed, separating 2 patterns of organization and administration makes it possible to explore combination of the 2 patterns. For example, if each pattern is divided, then 4 types of organizations are possible. To give you a little information of these 4 types of organizations, let us take a look at these descriptions. In Weberian structure, professionalization and bureaucratization are complementary and both high. This pattern is similar to the ideal type described by Weber, but we still call it as Weberian structure. Second, authoritarian structure emphasizes high bureaucratic authority with low professional consideration. Their authority is based on position and hierarchy. It disciplines compliance to the rules, regulations, and directives. And power is concentrated and flows from top to bottom, which the superior always has the highest power. Third is professional structure. We can see in the table that it is high in professional and low in bureaucratic because members of the staff are viewed as professionals who have the expertise and competence to make important organizational decisions. The rules and procedures serve as their guides rather than as strict formats to be applied uniformly. In here, teachers have much power in the organizational decision-making process. Lastly, the chaotic structure. It has low degree of bureaucratization and professionalization. Therefore, confusion and conflict represents day-to-day operations. Inconsistency, contradiction, and ineffectiveness are likely to happen in chaotic structure. Also, strong pressures will arise to move toward one of other structural types. The next is formalization of structure by Hoy and Sweetland. Schools are formal organizations with many of the same characteristics as bureaucratic organizations. Organizational research depicts two conflicting views of the human outcomes of bureaucracy. The negative side suggests that bureaucracy alienates, fosters dissatisfaction, stifles creativity, and demotivates employees. Whereas the positive view maintains that it provides needed guidance, clarifies responsibility, reduces role stress, and helps individuals feel and be more effective. But how can we resolve these two views? Paul Adler and Brian Boris of 1996 offer a possible solution as they interpret formalization as an organizational technology and identify two types of formalization which are enabling and coercive. Does anyone know what is formalization? In the Weberian sense, formalization is the extent of written rules, regulations, procedures, and instruction. To better understand this topic, let's take a look to the definition of these two types of formalization. Enabling formalization is a set of procedures that help employees deal more effectively with inevitable problems. Rules and procedures do not have to be designed to make the work foolproof. In fact, they cannot be. Rather, what is needed is flexible set of guidelines or best practices that enable one to deal more effectively with surprises that occur. On the other hand, coercive formalization is a set of procedures that punishes and attempts to force unwilling subordinates to comply. Rules and procedures become substitute for commitment rather than complements to it. Instead of giving committed employees access to gather organizational learning and best practice guidelines, these coercive procedures are designed to force compliance and cooperation.
Now, we are going to tackle about Mintzberg's coordinating mechanisms of structure. Henry Mintzberg describes structure simply as the ways in which an organization divides its labor into tasks and then achieves coordination among them. When we say structure, it is where a group of people or organization is divided and are being assigned to work on any specific tasks through coordinating with each other. So there are 5 basic coordinating mechanisms, which is the fundamental means that organization use to monitor and control work. So first is the mutual adjustment. Second, direct supervision. Third, standardization of work processes. Fourth, standardization of outputs. And the last one is standardization of worker skills. So the first basic coordinating mechanisms is the mutual adjustment. So what is mutual adjustment? Mutual adjustment is a coordination through the simple process of informal communication. So in this mechanism, workers coordinate their efforts by informal discussion and adjustment. Mutual adjustment is direct and basic. It is necessary not only in the simplest organization but also in the most complicated organization. The second one is direct supervision. So direct supervision is coordination through personal command. In this mechanism, one individual has the responsibility for monitoring and controlling the work of others. As the size of an organization increases, so too does the likelihood that mutual adjustment will become less effective and direct supervision is more necessary. So as work activities become more and more complicated, mutual adjustment nor direct supervision is sufficient. So the work is standardized. Coordination of parts is achieved by incorporating them in a carefully planned program for the work. So these are the 3 basic ways to obtain standardization in organizations. First is standardized work processes, the outputs, and the skills. The third one is standardization of work. It is achieved by specifying or programming the contents of the work. so it is clearly to communicate to the operator exactly how the job should be performed. There is a certain processes that an individual should follow in his or her work. The written directions to develop a lesson plan are also an example. So the process of developing the plan is described carefully in step-by-step directions. The fourth one is standardization of output. It is attained by specifying the results of the work, the fundamental dimensions of the product or of the performance are enumerated. So for example, taxi cab drivers are not usually given a route. They are merely told the destination. So it is similar for the teachers also. Teachers may simply be told that the students should be able to perform at a basic level in a given area. So that means to achieve that level may be left to the teacher. The outcomes of the work are described carefully and employees are expected to achieve those standards. So the last basic coordinating mechanism is the standardization of skills. It is a coordination mechanism that provides indirect control of work. Here, specifying the kind of training required to do the work standardizes skills and knowledge. So training supplies workers with patterns of work to be performed as well as the basis of coordination. So in this mechanism, Mintzberg observes that when an anesthesiologist and a surgeon meet in the operating room, typically little communication occurs by virtue of their respective training. So each knows precisely what to expect. Also, their standardized skills provide most of the coordination. Now, let's talk about the DepEd organizational structure based on Republic Act No. 9155. Republic Act 9155, or the Governance of Basic Education Act of 2001, is an act instituting a framework of governance for basic education, establishing authority and accountability, renaming the Department of Education, Culture and Sports as the Department of Education and for other purposes. These are the DepEd management structure. To carry out its mandates and objectives, the department is organized into two major structural components. First is the central office. It maintains the overall administration of the basic education at the national level. Second, the field offices, which are responsible for the regional and local coordination and administration of the department's mandate. Republic Act 9155 provides that the department should have no more than 4 undersecretaries and 4 assistant secretaries, with at least 1 undersecretary and 1 assistant secretary who are career service officers chosen among the staff of the department. At present, the department operates with 4 undersecretaries in the areas of programs and projects, regional operations, finance and administration, and legal affairs. 4 assistant secretaries in the areas of programs and projects, planning and development, budget and financial affairs, and legal affairs. At the subnational level, the field offices consist of the following: 16 regional offices, including the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or ARMM, each headed by a regional director and a regional secretary in the case of ARMM. There are 157 provincial and city schools divisions, which is headed by a schools division superintendent, and the assisting schools division offices are 2,227 school districts, which is headed by a district supervisor, and under the supervision of the schools division offices are 48,446 schools, broken down as follows: 40,763 in elementary schools, 36,255 the 34 of it are public schools and the 4,529 are private schools. And the Department of Education Secretary is in charge of the overall authority and supervision over the operations of the department. Now, under the national level is the Secretary of Education, who has the authority, accountability, and responsibility for the following. First is formulating national educational policies. Second, formulating a national basic education plan. Third, promulgating national educational standards. Fourth, monitoring and assessing national learning outcomes. Fifth, undertaking national educational research and studies. Sixth, enhancing the employment status, professional competence, welfare and working conditions of all personnel of the department, and enhancing the total development of learners through local and national programs and projects. Now, in the division level, under it is the school's division superintendent. A division shall consist of a province or a city which shall have a school's division superintendent. There shall be at least one assistant school's division superintendent and office staff for programs, promotion, planning, administrative, fiscal, legal, ancillary, and other support services. So the division level should be consistent with the national educational policies, plans, and standards. The school division superintendents shall also have the authority, accountability, and responsibility for the following. First is developing and implementing division education development plans. Second, planning and managing the effective and efficient use of all personnel, physical and fiscal resources of the division, including professional staff development. Third, hiring, placing, and evaluating all division supervisors and schools district supervisors, as well as all employees in the division, both teaching and non-teaching personnel, including school heads except for the assistant division superintendent. Under the school level is the school's district supervisor. A school district shall have a school district supervisor and office staff for program promotion. The school's district supervisor shall primarily perform staff functions and shall not exercise administrative supervision over school principals unless specifically authorized by the proper authorities. The school district supervisor is responsible for 1. Providing professional and instructional advice and support to the school heads and teachers or facilitators of schools and learning centers in the district or cluster. 2. Curricular supervision. And third is performing such other functions as may be assigned by proper authorities. Under the school is the school head or principal. There shall be a school head for all public elementary schools and public high schools or a cluster. The establishment of integrated school from existing public elementary and public high schools shall be encouraged, subject to the guidelines that will be issued for the purpose by the Secretary of Education. So these are the authority, accountability, and responsibility of the school head. First is setting the mission, vision, goals, and objectives of the school. Second, creating an environment within the school that is conducive to teaching and learning. Third, implementing, monitoring, and assessing the school curriculum and being accountable for higher learning outcomes. 4. Developing the school education program and school improvement plan. 5. Offering educational programs, projects, and services which provide equitable opportunities for all learners in the community. 6. Introducing new and innovative modes of instruction to achieve higher learning outcomes. 7. Recommending the staffing complement of the school based on its needs. 8. Encouraging and enhancing staff development. 9. Establishing school and community networks and encouraging the active participation of teacher organizations, non-academic personnel of public schools, and parents-teachers community associations. 10. Accepting donations, gifts, bequests, and grants in accordance with the existing laws and policy of the department for the purpose of upgrading teachers or learning facilitators, competencies, improving and expanding school facilities, and providing instructional materials and equipment. Such donations or grants must be reported to the division superintendents. And last, performing such other functions as may be assigned by the secretary, regional director, and schools division superintendents where they belong.
Organizational culture of schools. Number 1. Definition of organizational culture. The notion of culture brings with it conceptual complexity and confusion. No intact definition for culture from anthropology exists. Instead, we find numerous diverse definitions. It should be surprising, therefore, that there are many definitions of organizational culture. William Auchi defines organizational culture as symbols, ceremonies, and myths that communicate the underlying values and beliefs of that organization to its employees. For Henry Mintzberg, he refers to culture as organization ideology or the traditions and beliefs of an organization that distinguish it from other organizations and infuse a certain life into the skeleton of its structure. But Edgar Schein, however, argues that the culture should be reserved for a deeper level of basic assumptions, values, and beliefs that become shared and taken for granted as the organization continues to be successful. Our general definition of organizational culture is a system of shared orientations that hold the unit and give it a distinctive identity. But substantial disagreement arises about what is shared: norms, values, philosophies, perspectives, beliefs, expectations, attitudes, myths, or ceremonies. Another problem is determining the intensity of shared orientations of organizational members. Do organizations have a basic culture or many cultures? Moreover, there is a disagreement on the extent to which organizational culture is conscious and overt or unconscious and covert. Number 2. Levels of organizational culture. One way to begin to untangle some of the problems of definition is to view culture at different levels. Culture is manifested in norms, shared values, and basic assumptions, each occurring at different levels of depth and abstraction. Culture as shared norms. A fairly concrete, some would say superficial, perspective on culture emerges when behavioral norms are used as the basic elements of culture. Norms. Norms are usually unwritten and informal expectations that occur just below the surface of experience. Norms directly influence behavior. They are much more visible than either values or tacit assumptions. They provide a clear means for helping people understand the cultural aspects of organizational life. Culture as shared beliefs and values. At a middle level of abstraction, culture is defined as shared beliefs and values. Values are beliefs of what is desirable. They are reflections of the underlying assumptions of culture and lie at the next level of analysis. Values often define what members should do to be successful in the organization. When we ask people to explain why they behave the way they do, we may begin to discover the central values of the organization. Shared values define the basic character of the organization and give the organization sense of identity. If members know what your organization stands for, if they know what standard this should uphold, they are more likely to make decisions that will support the standards. They are also more likely to feel part of the organization and that organizational life has important meaning. Culture as tacit assumptions. As its deepest level, Culture is the collective manifestation of tacit assumptions. When members of an organization share a view of the world around them and their place in that world, culture exists. That is, a pattern of basic assumptions has been invented, discovered, or developed by the organization as it learned to cope with its problems of external adaptation and internal integration.
Functions of culture. Although there may be no one best culture, strong cultures promote cohesiveness, loyalty, and commitment, which in turn reduce the propensity for members to leave the organization. This is according to Maude, Porter, and Steers, 1982. Moreover, Rubens in the year 1991 summarizes a number of important functions performed by the organization's culture. First, culture has a boundary-defining function. It creates distinctions among organizations. Second, culture provides to organization with a sense of identity. Third, culture facilitates the development of commitment to the group. Fourth, culture enhances stability in the social system. Fifth, culture is the social glue that binds the organization together. It provides the appropriate standards for behavior. Culture serves to guide and shape the attitudes and behavior of organizational members. It is important to remember, however, that strong culture can be either functional or dysfunctional. That is, it can promote or impede effectiveness. Schools selectively transmit those values and knowledge that a society determines as appropriate through programs in it. Culture determines the standards of behavior. For a person to perform skillfully in the society as expected of an educated person, one must have been fully brought up and trained in that culture. Changing school culture. We have little information on, let alone answers to, the complex problem of changing the school workplace. Two things are clear, however, there is no quick and simple way to change the culture or climate of schools. Long-term systemic effort is more likely to produce change than short-term fads. Ralph Gilman in the year 1984 has successfully implemented a procedure for changing the normative culture of organizations. A norm-changing strategy. Most organizational members can list the norms that operates in their work group and even suggest new norms that would be more effective for improving productivity and morale. That is according to Gilman, Saxton, and Serpa in the year 1985. A number of ways can be used to surface actual norms, but participants are usually reluctant to specify norms unless they are confident that the information will not be used against them or the organization. Gilman in the year 1984 recommends the following 5-step procedure as a norm-changing strategy. Surface norms. Teachers usually in a workshop setting identify the norms that guide their attitudes and behaviors. Articulate new directions. Teachers discuss where the school is headed and identify new directions that are necessary for progress. Establish new norms. Teachers identify a set of norms that they believe will lead to improvement and organizational success. Identify culture gaps. Teachers examine the discrepancy between actual norms and desired norms. This discrepancy is a culture gap. The larger the gap, the more probable that the existing norms are dysfunctional. Close the culture gaps. The act of listing new norms often results in many group members actually adopting the new and desired norms. That is according to Gilman, 1984. But the teachers as a group must also agree that the desired norms will replace the old norms and that the changes will be monitored and enforced. Subsequent teacher meetings can then be used to reinforce the new norms and prevent regression to old norms and practices. John Miner in the year 1988 notes that this process is especially useful in identifying the changing negative aspects of an organization's culture.
Organizational climate of schools. Organizational climate focuses on shared behavior rather than beliefs. To be sure, there is a difference between behaviors and beliefs, but the two views for the most part supplement each other. What is organizational climate? Climate was initially conceived as a general concept to express the enduring quality of organizational life. According to Renato Taguiri, 1968, a particular configuration of enduring characteristics of the ecology, milieu, social system, and culture would constitute a climate, as much as a particular configuration of personal characteristics constitute a personality. B.H. Gilmer, 1966, defines organizational climate as those characteristics that distinguish the organization from other organizations and that influence the behavior of people in the organizations. George Litwin and Robert Stringer, 1968, introduced perception into their definition of climate, a set of measurable properties of the work environment based on the collective perceptions of the people who live and work in the environment and demonstrated to influence their behavior. Over the years, there has been some consensus on the basic properties of organizational climate. Marshall Poole, 1985, summarizes the agreement as follows. Organizational climate is concerned with large units. It characterizes properties of an entire organization or major subunits. Organizational climate describes a unit of organization rather than evaluates it or indicates emotional reactions to it. Organizational climate arises from routine organizational practices that are important to the organization and its members. Organizational climate influences members' behaviors and attitudes. School climate is a broad term that refers to teachers' perceptions of the general work environment of the school. The formal organization, informal organization, personalities of participants, and organizational leadership influence school climate. To put simply, the set of internal characteristics that distinguish one school from another and influence the behavior of each school's members is the organizational climate of the school. More specifically, school climate is a relatively enduring quality of the school environment that is experienced by participants, affects their behavior, and is based on their collective perceptions of behavior in schools. The definition of organizational climate as a set of internal characteristics is similar in some respects to early descriptions of personality. Indeed, the climate of a school may roughly be conceived as the personality of a school. That is, personality is to the individual as climate is to the organization. Because the atmosphere of a school has a major impact on the organizational behavior, and because administrators can have a significant positive influence on the development of the personality of a school, it is important to describe and analyze school climates. According to Anderson 1982 and Miskel et al. 1988, climate can be conceived from a variety of vantage points. We turn to a variety of lenses to view school climate, including openness, health, and citizenship. Each provides the student and practitioner of administration with a valuable set of conceptual capital and measurement tools to analyze, understand, map, and change the work environment of schools. Changing the climate of schools. There is no quick and simple way to change the culture or climate of schools. Long-term systematic effort is more likely to produce change than short-term fads. Two general strategies for change follow. Alan Brown, 1965, has developed a clinical strategy as well as growth-centered approach. The two strategies are not alternatives to each other. They can be used simultaneously because they complement each other. The growth-centered strategy is concerned with the nature of individual development within the school. It embodies a set of assumptions that guide all attempts to change the climate of the school, whereas the clinical strategy is a specific action-oriented approach to change. Each of these change strategies offers potential guidelines for the practicing administrator that we will review briefly. The clinical strategy. The manipulation of intergroup and interpersonal interactions can foster change. Such a clinical strategy for change can proceed through the following steps. The approach begins with a thorough knowledge of the dynamics of the school organization. Such knowledge, of course, comes through careful observation, analysis, and study. The prospective principal may have acquired much of this knowledge through experience, but typically, a more systematic analysis is enlightening and valuable. As a prelude to such a study, he or she must understand the salient aspects of organizational life, including the basic norms and values of the faculty. The conceptual perspectives provided by such measures as the OCDQ, OHI, PCI, and OHB can substantially aid this learning about the school organization. The second step in the process is diagnostic. Here again, conceptual capital from a variety of perspectives can provide labels for diagnosing potential trouble areas. Poor morale, high disengagement, custodialism, distorted communication, unilateral decision-making, and low academic expectations are examples of such conceptual labels. The extent to which these concepts are clearly defined in the mind of the practitioner and fit together in a broader perspective probably mediates the effectiveness of the diagnosis. The third step is prognosis. The clinician judges the seriousness of the situation and develops a set of operational priorities to improve the situation. The fourth step is prescription. The appropriate course of action is often hidden. Suppose we decided that the school's atmosphere is too custodial in pupil control orientation. How can the situation be remediated? We might replace a number of custodial teachers with younger humanistic teachers. Research suggests, however, that the pupil control ideology of beginning teachers becomes significantly more custodial as they become socialized by the teacher's subculture, which in this case tends to equate tight control with good teaching. Merely replacing a number of custodial teachers without altering basic teacher norms about pupil control will probably have little or no impact at all. Altering basic teacher norms calls for a more sophisticated strategy. A first step in such a strategy is to eliminate teacher and administrator ignorance about the PCI. That is, to erase the shared misperceptions of educators with respect to pupil control ideology. Teachers generally think that principals are more custodial in pupil control ideology than they themselves are. And conversely, principals typically believe that teachers are more custodial in pupil control orientation than they report themselves to be. These common misperceptions need to be swept away if a more humanistic perspective is to be achieved. In other words, developing prescriptions at first seems easy enough, but experience shows that solutions to various school problems are usually oversimplified and often irrelevant. If administrators are going to be successful in changing the school climate and culture, then they must change the norms and values of the teacher's subculture as well as the basic shared assumptions of the faculty and administration. The last step in the clinical strategy is to evaluate the extent to which prescriptions have been implemented and are successful. Because planned change in social systems is often slow, continuous monitoring and evaluation are required. The growth-centered strategy. A growth-centered strategy simply involves the acceptance of a set of assumptions about the development of school personnel and the use of these assumptions as the basis for administrative decision-making. The assumptions are the following. 1. Change is a property of healthy school organizations. The principal should see schools and hence school climate in a constant state of flux. 2. Change has direction. Change can be positive or negative, progressive or regressive. 3. Change should imply progress. Change should provide movement of the organization toward its goals. Of course, not all change represents progress, yet the principal's stance is progress-oriented. 4. Teachers have high potential for the development and implementation of change. Principals are always ready to provide teachers with more freedom and responsibility in the operation of the school. These basic assumptions, if acted upon, would allow for a growth policy, which in turn leads to increased opportunities for professional development. From this perspective, administrators would remove obstacles from the path of professional growth and not manipulate people. Finally, the approach should help facilitate a climate of mutual trust and respect among teachers and administrators. The clinical and growth-centered approaches do not conflict in their assumptions, although they have different focuses, organizational and individual. The astute administrator draws on both strategies to change the climate of the school.